Well, folks, we're about 4 or 5 minutes after. I'm going to say let's go ahead and get started. We'll probably have a few stragglers join up. Like I said earlier, we've got between 25 and 30 folks have signed up, and we never know how many will actually show up. I think a lot of folks sign up hoping they'll get a recording afterwards, and we may oblige them this time. We may not. We'll see how this goes. But I appreciate all of you joining, especially just right before the start of a holiday weekend. I know you probably have a lot of things to wrap up, so you can hopefully take a long weekend this weekend, have a little downtime. This is the first of three webinars. It's three webinars in a series. And what these are kind of a redo or a follow-up of presentations that Rich Katzmann and I gave at Coverings a few months ago. We had a lot of good response at those. Had a lot of good questions came up. We only had 30 minutes for the topics. We felt like that wasn't quite enough to do it justice. So we thought what we do is offer these same topics again, cover the same presentations. We'll cover the presentation a lot quicker. We're only going to spend about 10 or 15 minutes on that because hopefully, in every one of the emails you got, you had a link to go get a copy of the presentation ahead of time. So hopefully you've already gotten that, downloaded it, looked at it, familiar with it, and are showing up with questions. Our game plan is to spend maybe 10 or 15 minutes doing a high-level review of the presentation and some of the data, and then really just open this up for questions. What we want to do is make this a forum for you guys to ask us questions, ask each other questions. If you've got specific data points you want to do some comparison with, this is a great shot to talk to some like-minded folks and do a little benchmarking. So that's what this is for here today. So appreciate you guys joining us. Most of you know me, Ed Young, Fabricator's coach. I've run a countertop shop in the past. I've owned my own brick and mortar business. I run manufacturing plants in multiple industries, so a long history in manufacturing. Been coaching in this industry. My first client was in '01, so I've been at it for that long. In case you don't know him, I'm going to let Rich introduce himself.
Sure. Thanks, Ed. Yep. So I'm Rich Katzmann. I currently, last 3 years, have been running the Rockheads group. For those of you that don't know much about the Rockheads, we're over 100. It's about 118 countertop shops, fabricators, all in our view doing things the right way, the best of the best. So they're automated, they're wet, they're in compliance with OSHA, they're hungry for data, benchmarking, they compare best practices with each other. And we have webinars every other Thursday and get together for live events. So if you're interested in the Rockheads, give me a call and we can certainly have a conversation about it. Prior to that, I ran Laser Products for 5 years. So that was really my introduction into the industry. In between, I did some commercial installs for people, but about 10 years in the industry. And what I love about benchmarking is my very first job out of business school was working for Arthur Andersen. And the first 3 years of my life, all I did was benchmarking. So I'm coming full circle back to the mid 90s on this conversation here, which I've always loved data and numbers. And so this is fun for me.
Good. And we're really privileged to have Rich with us. And I don't say that to make his head any bigger than it already is. But he, when you look at all the industry groups out there are a lot of good ones. And when I work with clients, if they haven't joined any groups, I'm always recommending they do that because I think that it's a really good opportunity to meet other shop owners and learn from each other. And I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity in this industry. But Rockheads is the only one I know of that really does a sound job of benchmarking on a consistent basis. Some other organizations have tried it in the past, but Rockheads is really the premier group for that. And I think there's a lot of benefit in it, as we'll talk about today. So really glad to have you, Rich. We really appreciate it. Our agenda today is we are going to stop at the top of the hour. But as I usually do for those of you who've attended these in the past, I usually leave the meeting open for another 20 minutes or so in case somebody has a kind of somewhat private question or you didn't get a chance to ask your question earlier or whatever. So we'll keep it open for a little while afterwards, but we will formally end at the top of the hour. So you can count on that because I know you've got other plans. All right, Chase.
My name is Chase Busenbark. I came from the stone industry. My family owns a stone fabrication company. It's what I grew up doing for the last 10 years of my work career. I do business sales and business brokerage where I've helped fabricators and stone shops around the country in selling their business. I work with a lot of certified SBA lenders to assist in those buyer processes. So yeah, that's what I do. I'm looking forward to learning a little bit about the have some key takeaways.
I suspect you'll show up in our third webinar, which is the mergers and acquisitions and business buying and selling, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I just had that suspicion, don't know. And by the way, the second webinar is diversifying your business, and it's diversifying your product lines and your market segments and your offerings and that sort of thing. And that's what the next webinar will be about. And we're doing, obviously this one's today. The next one is next month. We're doing one a month. So June for diversifying and July for the mergers and acquisitions and selling your business.
And what's cool about the diversification one too, that we'll update for June, is the whole beginning of it talks about trends, macro trends in the industry. So take multifamily. What do the experts say is going to happen to multifamily for the next couple of years? Retail new construction or single family homes. So we kind of introduce the section with some really compelling data on what's going on out there, right? To kind of help build the case of why you shouldn't have all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Appreciate that add in. Yeah. So, and I plan on plugging these at the end of the session today, but since we're at it, if you hit fabricatorscoach.com and on the homepage, top of the page, there's a rotating banner. You can download the presentation for each of these sessions.
And I'm sorry, I had to jump on you. Chase, I'm not going to let you off the hook that much, though. With you analyzing businesses all the time and what your business does, you certainly see a bunch of numbers. So I'm hoping you jump in and kind of share with us some of your thoughts too when we're talking through. I mean, we'll talk about EBITDA, we'll talk about gross margin, some of those things, I'm sure I won't say you live and die by them, but certainly you're out there talking to your folks about those too.
Certainly, Rich. Yeah, and if you have any of those, questions during that time frame, I feel more than free to ask me, and I'll give you any information that I would have or have seen.
Great, appreciate that. Good deal. All right, so what I'm going to do is we're going to try to Rich and I are going to try to tap dance here a little bit. I'm going to do a share screen and drive this thing. He'll do most of the talking, but again, we're just going to take about 10 minutes, do a quick high level run through this, hoping that you've already seen this data. Just to kind of get us started and cover this information.
Beautiful.
All right, so you already heard about us. So let's start off with this one. What is benchmarking?
Yeah, no, right. So right out of the gate, and this is going to feed into some of the coming slides too. Benchmarking only works if you act on it, right? So, I mean, it is a tool. To get a report with 30 numbers on it and to look at them and to do nothing is not going to help the business at all, right? So what we really preach and emphasize is, what do you do after it, right? You get your numbers, you see, hey, I'm high in this area, or why am I doing this? And it's really the action plan behind the benchmarking that adds all the value to it. We're going to get into a slide here in a couple that there of 8 reasons why we benchmark. So I'm not gonna blow that cover yet. There we go. Let's do it. Perfect. And some of these are obvious, and some of them aren't obvious. I mean, one of the things again that we like to talk a lot about is your employees want data. They want to be held to, not subjective criteria, but they want objective numbers for them to be able to hit, right? It holds them accountable. They want to be held accountable, right? And it really drives the train in one direction. So the numbers aren't, they're great for your business, for you to look at, to, say your material costs are high, to go beat the crap out of your suppliers, but they're also really important within your business and getting the train moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and then digging into the common theme, of course, in all of these 8 is data, 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 data. It's numbers. I find that shop owners have got really good intuition based on your years of experience in the industry. When you can start putting numbers on that and start quantifying that intuition, it really clarifies what's working well for you and what isn't, and to what degree it is or isn't working well for you.
Yeah.
So I think that's a key aspect here.
And one of my favorite stories is I went to a large shop large $20 million shop up out of Michigan, Detroit, and all they did, so number 5 here says numbers create competition, right? All the shop did was they bought a flat screen TV. I think they had 5 install crews, maybe a few more. And all they did on that TV was put how many square feet per day for the week the crews were doing. Didn't say anything, didn't offer any bonuses, did nothing more but expose what everybody was doing. And it immediately caused, nobody wanted to be last, and then everybody wanted to be first. So immediately the productivity of all of their crews went up just by exposing those numbers.
Yep. Shine a light on the data, and it's amazing what can happen. Certainly.
Yeah.
And another good, probably a similar aspect of that, any of you who get the electronic version of Stone World magazine, great article this month. Eric Tryon talks about some things he did in his shop before he sold it to help drive down material cost. And it was making data visible, challenging people, and then doing just a really simple reward system that wasn't complex and wasn't huge dollars, but it had big effects. So again, the data drives a lot of behavior, and then making that data visible.
And Ed, Eric's new shop is a Rockhead member, and their profitability, their earnings, EBITDA, was the 2nd or 3rd highest in our group. It was right around 30% profit. So
Eric's new shop, he's back in the business, huh?
He's back in the business, just as an owner. He's not going.
Okay.
He likes to fish too much, but he's
Yeah.
definitely involved with the business.
Yeah, I knew fishing was in his blood. We've talked about being on the water quite a bit together, but so yeah, I didn't realize he's back in it. That's interesting.
Yeah, yep, Alpharetta. So we're just gonna quickly, again, you guys have all this data, so I'd rather spend a little bit more time talking about a couple of specific numbers and why they're important than just kind of reading through the slides. But at the Rockheads, again, we collected 68 financial statements, operational statements. So if you think about your profit and loss statement, your balance sheet, some salary data, some operational data, this is what we collect from our shops to produce our benchmarking data. So it's quite a bit of data. You can see, from a Rockheads perspective, how big the shops are that participated, where they're making their money. So this just kind of gives you a good idea of how we do it. Everybody can do it differently. Everything's anonymous, so nobody's seeing other shops' data except for me. And that allows me, as I mentioned earlier, say your fab cost per square foot are $22 a foot, and the Rockheads average is $17 a foot, and the best in class is $12 a foot. What we do with this data is you would call me and say, hey, I suck at this. Sorry for the French. I want to get better. And then I can put you in contact with the shops within the group that are best in class, right? So again, it kind of goes to the, what good is the data unless you work on it?
Absolutely.
So
talking about pricing and costs.
Yeah. So the first thing we always start with is, what are you charging your customers, right? And so that is the first question, right? Across our group, just under $80 a foot is what customers are paying per square foot. This doesn't include sink cutouts and all of the extras. This is just for the install of the material, right? And you can see from this what the different breakdowns are, right? How much more expensive retail is versus production builders. So when we get into some of our other conversations about, hey, do I get into production builders? Well, you better be ready for $60 a foot instead of $100 a foot, right? And so this really helps you and other shops kind of gauge. Now, within the Rockheads, we then break this down into geographic areas, right? So if you're in the Denver area, we got a handful of shops in Denver. You can see how your pricing is relative to the 5 shops in Colorado. So it really starts helping you set your prices. And that's it. Determine what sectors you may want to increase. I didn't even need that little cheat sheet down there, Ed.
You got this one down pat, Rich. Yep.
So any thoughts or questions before we move on from kind of the the cost side, or I'm sorry, the pricing side of things?
Can I ask you a question? Is most of your pricing done per square feet? Because we kind of got out of that when we first started. We didn't get into the square foot price. We went right into job pricing, and kind of went off some of Aaron Crowley's stuff with the daily dollar demand, and that's how we're pricing ours, which we really like that part.
I love, and I know Ed does too, T dollars and throughput dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish every shop in the country used that, because our most profitable shops in the Rockheads certainly use that. Don, within our group, because the shops tend to be bigger, a lot of them will have square foot pricing for stocked materials, right? So maybe they've got 10, in stock, low pricing, great utilization, remnant tracking, all of that good stuff, and they'll charge square foot for that. And then everything else, special order, special projects, then that, similar to your business, is based on throughput dollars and what they want to get out of the job.
Okay.
It also brings up an interesting point too. If you stop and think about it, and Don, I'm definitely right there with you with how you're building your prices for your jobs. When you start looking at benchmarking, you kind of have to find a common measurement, a common denominator. And so while you may have a lot of Rockheads members that this data is coming from, I know this kind of sounds like a Rockheads commercial. It's not meant to be, but that's where the data is coming from. So that's our reference point. Then even though a lot of them may price their jobs the same way you do, they may bill their job costs that way, you still have to have a common metric, inches, yards, meters, millimeters, whatever to measure in. And so dollars per square foot is kind of a good default for comparison reasons.
Okay.
You can take any job you've sold, obviously, and take your sales price and figure out what market segment you're in and do the division by the square footage. You come up with the same number. Doesn't mean you built your price that way.
Okay.
And Don, we've got on the next slide actually a Rockheads average T dollars or throughput dollars. So
good.
Yeah.
I had a question also just on that pricing that the last slide.
Mhm.
For those other fabricator or fabrication shops, that's their price including materials. That's like out the door kind of average price. That's you said it's not including maybe some extras like sinks or whatever, backsplashes maybe or something like that, but that does have material included in it.
Yes, sir. That's all in. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's everything. Yeah.
And that's installed price?
Yeah. Where are you at, do you think, Don? Are you above or below 80? Denver's such an expensive area. I would imagine you're above it.
We're well above that. Yeah.
Are you in the hundreds, you think, as an average?
I bet we're at probably about 110.
That's awesome.
115. Yeah.
Good for you. That's great. And again, one of the reasons I have that first slide is again, the Rockheads are a pretty diverse group. A lot of them do big box work, right? Which tends to drag down. I mean, you can see $64 a foot tends to drag down the average pricing too. But yeah, a $110 is phenomenal. You would be near best. You'd be top 10% in our group.
Well, most of our stuff is just retail also. It's like we seldom get into a lot of the no big builder programs at all. A few contractors, but most of it's just retail. So I like that.
You didn't go down to Denver when there were 22 cranes up?
No, we're not. No, we like Boulder, where there's the high end customs.
Sure. Do you guys go up to the mountains since you're north already?
Yes, we do some of that up in Estes Park and stuff like that.
Sorry, Ed, I'm getting off track.
No, that's good. That's good. I think that the whole point of this is folks to ask questions and learn. So anything that's helping folks out, I think it's great.
All right, let's talk cost of goods sold. So this is always an interesting one, right? For years, materials have kind of bounced around a little bit as far as what percent of your total revenue is being spent on materials. We actually saw back, 3-4 years ago when COVID started and the supply chain issues, that a bunch of our shops for the first time ever went over 40% material spend. Luckily, everything's come back down. I mean, not only have materials gotten cheaper, right, but our members, every shop has been able to adjust their prices fast enough to be able to make sure that they're keeping up with the current prices, because it was just wild and fast, when we were getting price increases every 30, 60 days, and you'd have job quotes out there and you couldn't get your price sheets updated. So one note on this is 37 and a half was what we had this. What are you spending to get it installed? I know a lot of shops use $25 as a approximate estimate of what it costs to template, fab, and install. And so we're seeing here that our group is at 18, which is good, I believe. And then Don, kind of what we chatted about too. I know with T dollars, right? 60 is kind of a magic number, right? You want to be, from a cost perspective, you want to be below 60%.
Yeah, another good benchmark that I've seen the last few years, even with material prices going crazy, is that for walk-in off the street retail job to a homeowner, which is typically your highest price point, typically your materials cost, just your materials as a percentage of sales, if you're hitting right around 30%, give or take a few points, you're in a good spot. If you're getting above 35, it's kind of a warning sign. Go back and look at your material costs, make sure you've kept up with it. I have run into a few shops lately that in the last couple of years that just did not keep up with material cost prices, price cost increases, and they had materials as a percent of sales for walk-in retail jobs at 50%, and that's just leaving way too much money on the table. You just can't make money doing that. So, targets a good target's 30. I see a lot down as low as 25. If you get up to 35, that's okay, but if you get above 35, that's a big warning sign to go take a look at your pricing structure.
I wanted to ask on that direct labor number. We subcontract out some installation and templating. How is that factored into that number? Is that?
Yep. So our shops, we've got shops that do both. We've got shops that everything's outsourced. All those numbers are dumped into here. So it's either, loaded as an employee or just kind of your all-in dollars to your subs.
Okay.
Yep.
One other interesting thing too, since we're talking materials for a little bit, Ed, there are amazing opportunities with your suppliers depending on the time of the year that it is. They are discontinuing colors. They are overstocked at times. They have quotas they have to meet. So the idea of constantly be talking to your suppliers, and you're kind of helping each other out, right? Your regional rep, maybe saving up for, a spiff or, a bonus, and he may be able to get you pricing that you would never normally get. So I would keep those guys close, especially when we start getting into the third quarter, because then they're starting to really, we're talking, 50, 60% discounting just to get rid of stuff.
That's another great example of the benefit of joining these industry groups and attending them, because just because you're a member, you may not hear this. If you don't show up at the regional meetings, show up at the national meetings, you're not going to get a lot of this information. I was privileged enough, I ran into Eric Rapp, who's a distributor, worked with Rockheads at one point in time, but now works for a distributor on the West Coast. And Eric was kind enough to sit down with me and do a podcast, which we just released a few weeks ago, about what Rich is talking about, how to work with your slab supplier, how to take advantage of some of the options they've got out there and help manage some of your costs. So if you're interested, hit the Fabricators Coach podcast and download that episode.
Yeah. And they're giving, I know Eric specifically, he at times he's giving 90-day terms, right? I mean, and these days with, a year and a half of somewhat slow business for many of us, cash flow is king right now, right? So if you can extend out your terms a little bit, it's only going to help your business there too. So that would, and even consignment, right? And now they're doing weird stuff like modified consignment. There's a lot, the suppliers are, in my experience, right, for the first time in many, many years, are really working with the shops to win for both, because they don't want you guys struggling either, right? So they're willing to help.
It's probably the first time since before the recession, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's been interesting. The shop that I ran, I was running it before the recession started, and we did really well, surviving through the recession, and then the landscape totally changed afterwards. So it's been interesting. It's good to see them coming back to that in terms of benefit for the fabricator.
Yeah. Again, just a kind of a summary table, but interesting, right? Gross margin is such an important thing within all the shops, within all of our shops. a lot of the shops will pay commissions based on gross margin, right? That's how you're bonusing or commissioning your sales force. So knowing what your gross margin targets can be, should be, is extremely important, right? Again, you can see this is just our histogram. We certainly like to see gross margins over 45%. That allows for some extra cash flow, some extra EBITDA. But again, if you're in this kind of 35 to 45 range, that's solid, but you certainly should be pushing towards the top.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of different strategies to get there. If you're not sure what gross margin means, I know some folks with smaller shops may not necessarily use those terms a lot. And I know too, I look at a lot of P&Ls for companies that I work with. A lot of times P&Ls are structured differently because of how the owner has them set up, or maybe they're not working with an outside CPA, so they're not doing a lot of standard cost of goods sold, gross margin type division on their P&L. If you're not really sure what that means, talk to Rich or I offline. Be happy to walk you through that. So,
yeah. And it's a great way to compensate your sales force, right? I mean, again, I'm with Don. I would do it on T dollars, but if you're not a throughput shop, then gross margin's a great next step.
Yeah, because it gets the sales people look closer. It helps them drive activities that are going to support your profit better than just a top line sales number.
Yep, and certainly hot sauce items, right? We talk about adders, that a lot of times will have zero cost to your shop. Like take a chip minimizer, right? That's one of our most popular ones, where you just go in and you round the sink cutout. You charge the customer $300 for that. If you're running a CNC, it costs you nothing extra, and that's just all profit. So your sales force, right? If they're incented on gross margin, man, that's going to be attached to every job that goes out the door.
Yeah, and that's just one of a list of things you can use to bump up the price. I was fortunate enough to guest host a podcast for ISFA, where I interviewed Jeffrey Grand, and that's all we talked about was those add-ons to your sales to drive your margins up. So if you're interested in that, if you're an ISFA member, go hit their podcast library, and you can pull that one up and learn more about that.
All righty. So quickly on this one, Ed, I'm sorry I'm talking a little bit longer than maybe we planned, but right. So we talked about gross margin, right? 35% is kind of the low end of what you want. You really want it to be in the 40s, but that's fine. One of my favorite statistics is Peter DeCock, who founded Grand Courts, used to literally, when he was starting the business, would walk into shops and would ask them how much revenue they did. He would count the number of employees, and then he would either say you're a good shop or you're a bad shop. And that's how he literally grew Grand Courts. Even today, so that was 40 years ago. Even today, it still holds to be a really good metric. So, and Adam, again, a little confusing with if you're subbing people out, but you can estimate on that side. It's such an easy number to calculate. Take your revenue, take how many employees you have, and divide it. If you're at 160, 150, you're probably overstaffed. If you're at 250, man, you're humming and just rolling right along. I can tell you that average Rockhead, I think we were at 202, but which means we had plenty of shops that were overstaffed. And again, this is something we look at. If you remember the COVID years, everybody just hired everybody with a pulse, and and a lot of the shops got a little fat. So our revenue per FTE number as a group actually got worse during COVID. The amount, got worse after COVID ended, right? The amount of revenue was no longer sustaining the number of employees in the shop.
Yep, really good benchmarks.
Yeah. And then quickly on EBITDA, and that's really going to be focused on in the M&A, right? Because EBITDA basically is just how much profit your business is generating, and the ITDA is just getting rid of some of the noise within that number. So basically, it's my shop makes us this much money, and it's what other shops will look at if they're interested in buying your shop. If you guys are in acquisition mode and you're looking at buying another shop, it's a number you're going to focus on. But one of the challenges of our industry, and it's too bad, but it is what it is, right? Is our average throughout the industry, as it says here, is about 5% EBITDA. if you look across every other industry, we're probably in the bottom 10%. Our industry does not make as much money as other non-comparable things, whether it's a Taco Bell restaurant or, you name it, an accounting company. We are at the bottom. And Ed can get into this too, from kind of maybe from a mathematical standpoint, eventually, it's not today, I don't think, but when you're at 5 to 6% EBITDA and the industry slows, or you lose a big customer, or any blip happens in your business, all of a sudden your cash flow is threatened. And it's a real thing. We've got to drive, as an industry, we have got to drive our EBITDA into double digits. You just have to. Even 10 is good, but 15 should be really everybody's goal out there. And it's easy for me to sit here and say, let's do that, right? We all know that's not reality, but again, a very important metric to look at.
Can I
it's
ask a
absolutely-
question? Why is the
Yeah.
Rockheads group 10%? What is some of the reasons for that?
Well, because we're best in class. That's right.
All right.
The Rockheads, has been founded on data and benchmarking. And so I think the average tenure within our group is about probably 6 or 7 years. So this is what Rockheads focuses on, right? SFA, love SFA. If you want to learn what blade to use cutting Decton, join the SFA, right? NSI, ISFA, phenomenal for safety and marketing the industry, and they do some great stuff. The Rockheads group is the business group. This is what we wake up doing every day, is trying to make the shops more profitable. So as Ed mentioned, Hot Sauce or Jeffrey Grand's company, he's a Rockhead member, which is just add-ons. We are always waking up every day trying to think about how we can make our shops more profitable. And I'm sorry, this feels like way too much of a commercial, and that wasn't my intent.
Well,
no,
and
that's my question.
Well, but yeah, that's all right. The other dynamic here too is when you go back to the earlier slide about the size of companies' annual revenue that are in the Rockheads, that were in this database for this benchmarking data. When you get into larger companies that are 15, 20, $30 million companies, they simply are run totally differently than a $3 or $4 million company or $1 million company. It's a much more professional organization. It's much more structured. You've got people, shop managers, ops managers, sales managers who have strong experience probably before they got into this industry. They know what good safety programs look like. They know what good quality programs, good training programs. They know how to do HR right and how to run a business based on the numbers. You can't run a 20, 30, $40 million business well and profitably unless you run it based on the data and make good decisions on that. That's the difference between typically a $3 million company and a $30 million company, is one of the big significant differences. So you've got a lot more of those folks in the Rockheads, and that's part of the dynamic, is just the type of company. And a lot of what those of us who work with shop owners do is we're trying to take those shop owners that are in, $2 million, $3 million, $5 million, $6 million, and help them make those types of changes so they can get to 20, 30, 40 million by changing how they run the business. And that the success of that is what you're seeing in some of this data.
Oh, interesting.
And Ed, we see just, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's really interesting. Our smaller companies, right, 5 million, kind of in that area, man, they are grinding it out at 5%. I mean, even best practice sharing, everything we do to try to drive that out, that's a tough revenue number to be at, because you're kind of caught in between, right? And then we see this great increase in EBITDA from, say, 8 million to 15 million. And that's actually our peak. What happens when you get over 20, 25, 30, to continue to be that big, now you are with the Pulte's and the DR Hortons and the Home Depots, and those businesses all push down your profit, right? So we start to see kind of a curve and a flip. Now you're making more money because 13% of 30 million is more than 17% of 15 million, but your percent EBITDA starts to kind of backtrack a little bit after you get so big.
Yep. So interesting dynamics when you look across the industry there. We'll get deeper into EBITDA and how to drive that and what that means, how you calculate, not necessarily how you calculate it, but what you do with that in the mergers and acquisitions session in July. So if you're interested in that, that's what we'll run into. And just real quick, Chase, with your work helping folks buy and sell fab shops, these EBITDA averages pretty much the type, they mirror what you see in your experience?
Yes, they are. I would say that that's a pretty good standpoint. I've seen upwards of 20% multiple times on the healthier businesses. I would say that the averages are closer to that 10% range. And I think it's very important that if you're at 5 or 6%, you need to increase those before thinking about selling your business. Because whenever buyers go to view those, one, if they're not from the industry, if they don't have the background, which more, I would say 90 out of 100 inquiries that I table and have conversations with that are purchasing stone fabrication companies aren't from the industry. So they're viewing it as there's too much risk involved. And whenever it comes to purchasing a business, it's really highly sought after on that risk factor.
Yeah, and that's certainly true. So we'll get into that a lot deeper in July. You can see from our intent was 15 minutes to review the presentation, and not that I'm not knocking Rich at all. I did a great job summarizing. You even do it much quicker than we did at coverings, but there's so much information in here. It's tough to do a high level quick overview without having a lot of questions. And we've still got some time left. So anybody, we've triggered some questions. We've answered some of those as we've gone along. Any other questions that have popped up that you guys would like to know, maybe about some specific benchmarks, some metrics in your business you'd like to see if they fit some of the averages? One of the good things is Rich has at his fingertips right now all of the other data that's not on these screens. So if you got something specific you want to ask about, there may be something he can share with you. I know you got some burning questions, man. You and I've talked in the past. You got a bunch of questions. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's more like a starting point. I think it's an interesting circumstance we find ourselves in. I'm listening to these, explanation, especially the one about the founder of Grand Quartz and his quick evaluation. You walk into a shop, and if I run those numbers on my shop, I'm like, man, he'd tell me to close my doors, I think. So I think it's like, how do you get there? I mean, it's not a bad goal. I mean, we're maybe 1.2, $1.3 million shop a year. We're small. We're very little, and we're in growing stages. So where do we start with that? Like what do we look at first, and what do we tackle first? We have a good system in place right now, but it can always be refined. So I think when it comes to this financial side of things, like, okay, what do I look at first to tell me what my first step is to start making adjustments in what we do?
Yeah, the numbers can help you with some of that. I'm sorry, go ahead, Rich.
Oh, I was just going to ask, Courtney, you may have mentioned it before. What segments are you in? Who are you selling to get your 1.2?
So we were like almost everything retail and like working for general contractors. And the general contractor we work for, like, small custom remodel contractors. And because we couldn't take on anymore, we had a bridge saw and a couple of pro edges, and I just like that was keeping us busy. And so now when we upgraded to CNC, that wasn't even near enough work to keep the CNC busy, So now we're like, okay, now I chase after stuff. For the last year or so, I've been working on trying to change, have different segments, right? And so I actually picked up an account with Home Depot. We're servicing like 12 Home Depots. I negotiated good pricing with Home Depot, probably much better than most do. But we're kind of in a weird spot in California where there's not a lot of fabricators, and Home Depot it doesn't really have anyone local to cover this area. And so they were bringing guys from 4 or 5 hours away to cover our area, and they were looking for someone local. So it kind of worked out good, and I had a little bit of a leg up. So I was able to get, higher price per square foot out of them. So that was good. And then I just picked up two small track homes. They're local builders that are the developers that are building tracks, and they're having, phases. And so I picked up two of those recently. So now I'm starting to diversify those segments. So we have retail, we have contractors, we have some tracks, and now we have and Home Depot. So that's kind of where we're at today, but we're barely on the beginning of that. I mean, I'm barely getting started into most of this months, barely months into it.
That's awesome. You're right. There's two ways to get on the correct side of that formula. There's cut people or there's grow. And it looks like you are set up to grow, right? So I think that's great. Just got to hunker down a little bit, for a little bit. And again, I can't, again, not a selling thing. Hot sauce, right? If you're doing $1 million in retail and walk-in business, those customers want to be upsold, right? You go to Amazon, you buy a TV, and all of a sudden you've got, hey, you want to buy this TV stand? Do you want to buy this warranty? Do you want to buy this stuff, right? Customers expect to be upsold, and there's so many profitable, good ways to get, right? Nobody wants to make $500 on a job, right? You want to make $3K on a job, $2,500 on a job. And there's lots of good opportunities to do that. So I love the direction you're going. I can, just as a side note, we've done kind of an extensive analysis again at the Rockheads. I don't want to say it again. Because we have a lot of big box guys. We black tops. I mean, I know the California landscape pretty well as far as Depot goes. All of our analysis says you've got to have 20 shops to be profitable. And Depot likes to give you 8. Right, you got 12, so you're ahead of the curve there. But what we tell all of the shops that are just starting to get into it is beg, plead, and steal to get 20, because that now you can afford your systems, the extra processes, the procedures you're going to need to do. 20 just seems to be a magic number for some reason.
Okay, thank you for that.
Wow, that's great information. If you're not a member of ISFA, I just happen to think about that. That upselling podcast is also on the Fabricators Coach website under the podcast tab. I just happen to think about that, and so you can pick it up there. Another thing you can do, we talked a little bit about throughput, and we're not going to get into a deep discussion of it here, but one of the things you can do is when you figure the throughput on each job, and especially for a shop your size, Courtney, one of the things that's really interesting to do is take each of these different industry segments: Home Depot, production builder, custom home builder, retail, those kind of things. Take 3 or 4 jobs out of each segment, look at the sales price, figure your throughput dollars on each job, and then do a little kind of mental exercise. That is, take that job and say, okay, if I had 30 of these to do, and that's the only thing I had to do for the next month, what's my average output that I could fab and install these jobs every day? And if you know what your operating expense is, that's the cost to run your business every day, that daily cash burn rate, you start comparing all these different job types and these different market segments and even kitchen configurations and material types. And you do this analysis, you'll see a big spread in how fast each of those generates cash for you. And once you know that, then you can say, all right, where is my opportunity in my local market to go get more of this kind of work that generates cash for me really fast? When I do this with shop owners, find a shop that burns cash at $5,000 a day, and we do this analysis and find out that they're taking on work that if this is all they did, it would only generate $3,000 or $4,000 a day in throughput for them. And if you're generating less cash than you're burning each day, you're going to lose money, right? And sometimes when you're trying to fill a shop because you got new capacity, you may need to take a little bit of that work, but knowing that there's a difference. And then when that customer comes and pushes you on price, you know you got to hold your line. But you find other work that if that's all I did, I'm generating $15,000 in throughput a day against a $5,000 cash burn rate, and the guy starts pushing me on price, I got a little more leverage room there. Mm-hmm. So things like that help a lot. And I think, Courtney, in your case, the short answer is you've got new capacity. You've made the right decisions going to a digital shop. The real key right now is get that capacity full. And when you get that capacity full, then look at the systems it's going to take to help you manage that well. Those will make the biggest difference in profitability and helping you grow.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, it's good information.
Ed, you mentioned cash. Can I bring up one other quick thing on that?
Sure.
There's an initiative we started about 4 years ago that is probably my favorite. How much, Courtney, you're a Home Depot guy. How much does Home Depot collect up front when they sell a countertop?
I have no clue.
100%.
Really?
100%. Yep.
Okay. I didn't know
There
that.
is no reason that with your retail customers, you shouldn't be getting at least 75% upfront and 25% when you cut it.
Okay.
We've got over 80% of the Rockheads are at least at that number. A third of our group, just under a third of our group, are 100% upon signing the contract. And think about what that does. Now your installers don't have to collect. You don't have to try to get that money, right? You install it. Mrs. Jones is like, yeah, I don't know if I love this seam. You got everything up front, and the customer expects it, right? That's what Depot, Costco, Lowe's, all of them, 100% up front. And if you do some math, you will see an amazing change to your cash flow.
Excuse me, Rich, is that more of the retail business?
Yes.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah.
Because we're like a 50-50. We do a 50-50, and it's like maybe we're behind the times.
Yeah. No, 5 years ago, the majority of our shops were 50-50. Yeah. And we, I mean, you never like to use extremes. I can't think of a single shop that changed to 100% that went back because they were getting pushback from the customers. It's just, it's expected. It's what Depot does, right? I mean, you're just following that.
Yeah.
You go to a dealership to buy a car, you may finance it, but you're not walking out of there with that car. You're not going to drive that car off that lot until the dealer's got their money.
Yeah.
You know, before we get any more questions and answers, one of the things I want to do, this is a benchmarking webinar. We're talking about, we've talked about what benchmarking is and what the benefits are. We've shared some numbers. If any of you are interested in benchmarking with each other, jump in the chat right now and put your email address up there. And that way you guys, if you're interested in benchmarking, you guys can talk back and forth. You can email each other. You can ask each other questions. So if you're interested in talking with each other, kind of as an informal group, I think that's a great way to do that. Just put your name up there, your email address, and anybody who's interested, you guys just copy those down and chat. And if somebody has got some specific questions, wants to talk to somebody specifically, I've got everybody's email address. Just give me a holler and I'll connect you on email if you guys want to talk too. But I think, sharing these things amongst yourselves is hopefully you're seeing the benefit of knowing this kind of information and sharing it.
Yeah, I'm curious, Adam. I know you're a big numbers guy and you're new to the group. How were you gauging your numbers? Do you have a network of Fab friends that you guys would chat and?
I have, and I'd use industry standards type thing, and I kind of set my bar a little bit higher, I guess, so looking at over the manufacturing industry overall, there's really good national numbers, and like I said, the mindset of thinking yourself as a manufacturing shop rather than a stone installation shop, I think is a mindset that everybody can benefit from very, very strongly. We're a manufacturing shop. That is what we do. Our product happens to be this, but if I had to flip it to something else, we'd flip it to something else. Think of yourself as a manufacturer, not as a granite guy. So, I think there's great data of manufacturing nationwide. So, that's kind of where I pulled a lot of my staples from previously. But another reason why I also joined the Rockheads group is because that's all the data that I was using in the past was kind of national data, government agency stuff. But I'm sure Chase would say, you're competing against M&A, you're competing against all the manufacturers. So, if that's your exit strategy, or, a lot of people, you don't get to plan your exit in most instances. So let's make the company as valuable as possible all the time. Right. So.
You're definitely, looking at your business as a vehicle rather than as a lifestyle. That's refreshing to hear. I think that's probably another commonality in most of your members too, Rich, is that's a mindset that you guys look for, because prospective members, they apply to join. It's not write a check and you're automatically a member. You guys have to approve them coming in, right?
Right. And I would say, I haven't looked at it in a couple of years, but more than half of our owners come from outside the industry. So Adam was smart enough to kind of do that, building his business. Most of our members come in, kind of already with that mindset because they haven't been in the industry. So it's a completely different, again, not to bring up Jeffrey Grand's name again, but Jeffrey will say, right, I am a sales and marketing guy who sells countertops, and he will go to his grave saying that. Like you know, we can't survive as being artisans anymore, right? We've got to be businessmen. And like Adam said, you got to drive value into your business.
Yeah, what's cool about my background is primarily manufacturing. I've done this for decades in manufacturing in general and in hundreds of shops. And I like Adam's perspective a lot. When you start looking at a whole lot aspect of throughput and operating expense, it really ties into the whole value added aspect of what manufacturing does. Takes a raw material, converts it into a finished product that you sell. Just happens to be countertops in this instance. So yeah, I like that. That's a great perspective, Adam. We are at the top of the hour. We're just a minute or two past it. I know some of you have got other things you've got to go do, but we'll hold this open for another 20 minutes or so. Anybody got any additional questions? You just want to chat? We'll hang out. Again, want to thank all of you for joining us. Appreciate you being here. Hopefully this has been helpful for you. The only reason that we do these, it may have sounded a bit like a commercial today. It wasn't the intent. That was the source of the data. So we got to be honest about that. But the whole idea here is to help you find new ideas, different ways to look at your business, run your business better. My philosophy is, and it's not unique to me, but if you don't, your business is running exactly the way you've designed it to run. And if you're not happy with how it's running, you got to change how you've got it set up. And that's why we do these webinars, is just to share information to help you out. And so, folks, I appreciate you being here, and I hope you have an awesome Memorial Day weekend.